So we call it a population as a group of individuals of a single species, only one that you're considering, that occupy the same area at the same time. So it's important to observe a population due to the resources that they use, environmental factors that might influence their behavior, their surroundings that are going to do the same, and how they interact with one another and breed with one another. They are a species, so the interbreeding does take place. Population ecology is concerned with changes in population size and factors that will regulate populations over time. And we'll discuss a lot of these different scenarios, kind of hitting up the highlights. What you're going to see here in this section are a lot of graphs, really mapping out the data that has to do with populations. So a population ecologist might describe a population in terms of there are three that I'm going to give you: size, the number of individuals in a population, 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe it's 40, maybe it's 400, maybe it's 4,000. It depends on the species, depends on the population. Its density. Its density has to do with the number of individuals per unit area. So how dense is that population? Is it quite dense like you see here in this image? Or is it not dense like in the previous image I just showed you, where they have more space in between each other and individuals are able to not be so tightly packed with one another? And we also need to consider their age, the proportion of individuals of different ages in a population, like this cactus finch. So what I actually want to point out quickly here for age is that we actually have this graph. It's quite interesting. We have the percentage of a population on the y-axis. So this is telling me how much of that population is going to be what's graphed on the x-axis, the age. So 1-year-old cactus finches, a little under 10%. Let's give that about an 8% of the population. The entire population, all the individuals of that species in that given area will be 1 year old. Here we can actually see 0% for 2, 0% for 3. That's interesting. Now we see a drastic increase. About 45% of those individuals are age 4, and then we see variation with a drop-off at older ages, 10 and 11 years. That's interesting to consider age. Why would that be important? The age of the individuals in a given population will help us determine how successful that individual is from its infancy into its more geriatric older years. What this is telling me here is that the majority of individuals survive at age 4 because those that are able to ward off predation when they're younger, unfortunately those 2 and 3-year-olds, are more likely to be killed. If not predation, maybe illness, maybe lack of resources. Usually predation is what hits a marker there for me, because I see that so many of them do survive right here. And at 1 year old, that's because they're born, they do exist. So those between 0 to 1 year old, and then we see very, very low numbers, maybe not 0% as I read, but very, very low numbers for those more for those individuals in those infant years. Okay, so that's important to consider age. Check that I'm recording. I am. Okay, let's continue. So how does density relate to a population? Why would you care about density? Now really looking at those three things. The most obvious example has to do with intra-specific competition. That's competition of things such as resources. Space is another type of competition. You're competing for space. And intra-specific, you're competing within your own species. So that's important. If you have a quite dense population, you're going to be competing with each other for those precious resources. You have all the space and therefore less individuals in that population. You don't have to compete as much with each other. Resources are limited. They're not infinite. So, as limited food supply is divided among more and more individuals, birth rates may decline as individuals have less energy available for reproduction. So, this is actually pretty interesting. Check it out. We're going to have song sparrows here in this graph. Look at that beautiful song sparrow. And because of the density of the population that she lives in, her fertility rate will be affected. So here I can actually see on this side of the chart over here, less dense females. And over here towards the right, I have more dense females. See, I can see a percentage there, 0 to about 100%, 80 being quite high, and 0% being quite low. So let's say about, if there's a 5% density in that population of females, then that female, so if there's less of them, that female is going to have more offspring. Check it out. She'll have about somewhere towards 5 offspring. So less of the females, more offspring, huh? But as we get more dense in that population, let's see, we get a lot more females in that population to where we see about a 70% density, about 1.5, 1 to 2 offspring per female. So that's a really neat biological mechanism that this population can use. Okay, there's more females, less offspring. I don't have to expend that much energy for reproduction because the population will be just fine. It could also be limited resources. Why spend your energy there making offspring? So it's a really neat balance that song sparrows can use, and we see this with many other species as well. Density may also depress a population's growth by increasing the death rate. So that's also pretty interesting too, that density is quite drastically going to affect population growth.